Here at the University of Saskatchewan, we look out for one another. To help protect our USask community, it's important to learn and talk about sexual violence response and prevention so that we can work to keep our community safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men experience sexual violence? So, what do we mean by the term sexual violence? It's an umbrella term that includes both sexual harassment and sexual assault. Sexual violence can be viewed along a continuum that begins with attitudes and beliefs. Problematic attitudes and beliefs contribute to the internal and external justifications for sexual violence. Thoughts precede actions. For example, when someone has problematic attitudes that no one challenges, that person may express their attitudes verbally, which is sexual harassment. Sexual harassment includes a range of actions. Actions like repeatedly asking someone out when they are not interested, or sending unsolicited, sexually explicit photos. Remember, if you want to send someone a sexually explicit photo, ask first. If they say no, then don't send it. Sharing a sexually explicit photo without consent is another form of sexual harassment. This is true regardless of whether you did or did not want to see that photo in the first place. If you didn't consent to receiving a sexually explicit photo, sharing it with the world might seem like a good way to see justice served at the time. But actually, sharing another person's sexually explicit photo is against the law in Canada. There's a lot of ways sexual harassment happens, and this has not even been an exhaustive list. Sometimes, inappropriate behavior is brushed off as compliments or jokes, but that doesn't mean it's okay. It's not okay. It's sexual harassment. Sexual harassment happens more frequently than sexual assault, and the attitudes and beliefs related to sexual harassment serve to normalize and justify sexual assault. You see, participating in catcalling, rape jokes, and crude locker room talk sends the message that sexual violence is insignificant. But once someone justifies sexual harassment, it becomes easier to justify sexual assault. You may be thinking, this is political correctness gone mad. But when you laugh along or even stay silent, you're actually normalizing and encouraging potentially criminal behavior. Sexual harassment becomes sexual assault when non-consensual sexual touching occurs. Let me repeat that. Sexual harassment becomes sexual assault when non-consensual sexual touching occurs. Meaning that sexual assault includes actions ranging from unwanted touching, like hugging, slapping, groping, and that super awkward shoulder rub, to actions like sexual coercion, fondling, non-consensual oral sex, attempted rape, and penetration. If you think hugging, slapping, or rubbing shoulders is not a big deal and that no one means harm by doing those things, then you're wrong about that. You see, it's not your intent behind the action that matters, but how that action made another person feel. Justifying sexually violent actions is a big problem, and it happens way too often. Can you imagine believing that someone deserved to be sexually assaulted because of the clothes they were wearing, and that they were drinking, or the fact that they were alone? These types of beliefs are myths that serve to justify our attitudes and actions about sexual violence by removing the blame from the perpetrator and placing it all on the victim. Since many people still justify sexual violence, it's no wonder that only 1 in every 20 sexual assaults is reported to the police. What is much more likely is that a survivor will share their story with someone they trust, like a peer, a friend, or a family member. Maybe that someone will be you. If someone trusts you enough to share their story of sexual violence, try responding with, "I believe you. It's not your fault. And how can I help?" You might think you know what's best for that person, but it's so important that you let them decide what they need and what they would like to do. If they don't want to report or even get professional help, that's okay. It's up to them to decide. However concerned you are, you need to respect their choice about what they need. We know that receiving disclosures of sexual violence can be difficult. If you need support or advice, you can call the Student Affairs and Outreach team at the University of Saskatchewan and speak with one of their team members. I'll give you that number at the end. So, Instead of just responding to sexual violence, how can you prevent it? First, you can practice and talk about consent in your own relationships. You'll be doing yourself a favor. Not only is it the right thing to do, but research tells us that talking about consent has been linked to a more satisfying sex life. Since a recent survey by the Canadian Women's Foundation found that only 28% of Canadians fully understand consent, let's review the concept. Consent is a voluntary and enthusiastic agreement to engage in sexual activity. Consent is clear, coherent, ongoing, willing, and informed. So, to be clear, consent needs to be active. Silence is not consent. If someone says, "I'm not sure," maybe, "I'm tired," it's their polite way of trying to tell you that they're not comfortable and don't consent. Being coherent means that people incapacitated by drugs or alcohol cannot provide consent. From a legal standpoint, someone who lacks that capacity to understand the who, what, when, where, why, or how of the situation cannot make rational, reasonable decisions and cannot consent. Ongoing means that consent must be granted every time. If someone consents to sexual activity once, that doesn't mean they're consenting to future sexual activity. Being willing means that consent can never be given under pressure. Consent cannot be given through psychological or emotional manipulation, or through physical violence or threats. And people in positions of trust, power, or authority over someone else should never abuse that position to gain consent. Informed means that the person is consenting under one particular set of circumstances. If those circumstances change, you do not have consent anymore. For example, if someone consents to sex with a condom, but then the condom is removed without their knowledge, then there is no consent. In fact, anyone who does so is breaking the law. Once you check all of these boxes, you have consent. It may take some practice at first, but you'll get the hang of it. It's not just the law. It's the right thing to do. The other way you can prevent sexual violence is through being a prosocial bystander. Sounds fancy, doesn't it? All it actually means is that you think and behave in ways that help other people or society as a whole. To be a prosocial bystander, you can challenge your own views by educating yourself. Think about the language used in TV shows, movies, and music. Is it funny and entertaining, or does it actually serve to support sexual violence? Learn more about topics like sexual harassment, sexual violence, and rape myths. Take a look under the video for some recommended content, including bringing in the bystander. When someone makes a rape joke, engages in crude locker room talk, or catcalls someone, don't join in on the laughter. Distract a harasser. You can do this by asking the victim for the time, directions, or even just pretending that you know them from somewhere. Anything to stop what is happening from continuing. Make sure your friends have a safe way to get home at the end of the night of partying. And don't leave anyone behind. If you see someone who's visibly intoxicated, friend or stranger, being taken somewhere at a bar or party, check in with them. Tell them you need to talk to them about something privately. Or even offer to call them a cab. The whole thing could take less than 5 minutes and is seriously worth it. Finally, keep yourself safe. And remember, if you ever need support, call the Student Affairs and Outreach team at 306-966-5757 or visit us in Place Royale on the 3rd floor.